Good evening. Welcome to our monthly agenda setting session of the Mayor and Commission of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County. We appreciate those of you who are attending with us in person tonight and those watching us remotely. If you'd like to have an agenda to follow along, there in the hall to the right of the doors on a table just outside the doors. There'll be no final action taken on items that are discussed tonight. Items discussed will move to our business meeting on April the 4th for consideration and vote. If you have a cell phone or other device, please turn them off or to silent. There'll be two opportunities tonight for public input. The first, our consent agenda, items 1 through 9. The second, for new business, items 10 through 12. And citizen input is not accepted at our work sessions for staff reports from the Planning Commission recommendations, which are on tonight's agenda items 13 through 17. We'll have a public hearing for those items at our May 2nd meeting. Rules of Commission allow citizens 3 minutes for comment. There's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk, which will turn yellow at 2.5 minutes. Please have your comments finished by the time the light turns red at 3 minutes. If you brought handouts that you'd like to share with us, with Mayor and Commission, if you hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll make sure we get them. And before we begin this evening, I want to recognize some people behind the rail. 3 of our commissioners, Diane Bell, Sharon Dickerson, and Andy Herod, have joined Commissioner Jared Bailey and Allison Wright in achieving the core certification through the ACCG Leadership Program. These 5 commissioners have dedicated 66 hours of class time in addition to travel and study time to improve their effectiveness to serve our citizens better. So I'd like to ask if Laura Meadow, who's the director of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, and Jeff Christie, ACCG, that's Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I'd say ACCG and forget what it stands for. Deputy Director of Leadership Development. If the two of y'all would come up here and do the honors of presenting the certificates, I would appreciate it. Okay, our 3 commissioners need to come out so that they can be presented.
Mayor, thank you so much, and distinguished members of the Commission, for allowing us to be here for just a few minutes tonight at this session to present these certificates. On behalf of the University of Georgia, let me say, first of all, how much we appreciate you all. And we have, as I think everybody knows, in addition to teaching and research at the University of Georgia, we have a real special mission to deliver our resources to make a difference in the lives of citizens across our state. And our Institute of Government, has a responsibility of working with government to try to make it work better and help people do their jobs and provide tools to make great decisions. And one of the ways we do that is by partnering with a lot of great groups like ACCG and all the great things they do for county government. We have this training program that we've been doing for over 25 years where we have various levels of certification that commissioners can reach. And I think it really represents not only an investment of resources, but especially of time and commitment on behalf of elected officials who have a lot going on, both personally and for the Commission. And so for you to dedicate this time, we really appreciate it so much. We hope that you've gained from it. So as the Mayor said, this represents 66 hours of training to be the certified county official. And we have certificates tonight to present to you. But before we do that, I'd like my colleague from ACCG, Jeff Christie, to say a few words too.
Well, I'd like to echo Dr. Meadows' comments and say thank you and tell you how much we appreciate you and fellow commissioners and mayor. We appreciate y'all too, because it takes support of a group like this for these folks to achieve what they have. The certification process, like Dr. Meadows said, we've been partnering with CVIOG for a little over 25 years. We've got 3,000 some odd county officials, most of them elected in the state of Georgia, that have achieved this certification. It sounds like a big number, but over that period of time, it's really not. It does take a lot of dedication and a lot of effort. And congratulations to you all on behalf of our executive director, Ross King, who I know would like to be here. I bring you his greetings and his congratulations and say thank you and congratulations on behalf of ACCG, Georgia's County Association. So with that, Dr. Meadows.
Okay. Commissioner Diane Bell. Congratulations. Yes.
She's got to
Oh, she has, oh, okay, great. Let's do one. Great.
Mike and Jerry, you guys are in this.
photobombing.
Commissioner Sharon Dickerson. Congratulations and thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Now Jerry's in there.
Okay.
You know Mike's gonna have to.
And last but certainly not least, Commissioner Andy Harrod. Congratulations.
You want to do yours this way, Andy, to save the.
Okay, sure, save the embarrassment.
Least and certainly last. This is the better side of the room anyway.
Thank y'all very much.
Congratulations.
Laura and Jeff, thank y'all so much for coming over here to do the honors for us. And I,
For having us.
oh, but and I want to tell you, I'm really proud of these guys because I doubt there are very many counties that have 5 certified officials serving because of all those hundreds that you talked about. What was the number, Laura? Or Jeff, 3,000. And that's over 25 years. Many of those are no longer serving in office. I doubt there are very many counties that have 5 officials within their county that have achieved this. So I'm proud of you guys. And, you know, we heard somebody say just lately, who thought it would be this hard? And I think everybody that gets elected to office, particularly local office, says, who thought it would be this hard? Because government is extremely complicated. And getting those classes and that certification to help you understand what we're doing helps you be a better commissioner and makes you more valuable to our community. So thank you very much. So now we will go to our business of our agenda setting meeting. And the first order of business is our consent agenda. And items on our consent agenda have been reviewed by the agenda team, which is the mayor pro tem, the attorney, and senior management staff, and we recommend them for approval at our voting meeting on Tuesday, April 4th. The mayor or any commissioner may remove an item for discussion from the consent agenda. Otherwise, they'll be acted on as one item at our business meeting. This is the time for public comment on those items, and they're item 1 through 9. Anyone who would like to speak to one of those items, now would be the time to come to the podium and give us your name and address and which item you're speaking to. And it doesn't look like anybody's here to speak to us tonight. Quite unusual. Yeah, I miss all those folks. Commissioners, is there anyone that would like to take something off? Ms. Link and then Mr.
I'd like to take off 4, 5, and
Gertz.
7, please.
Okay, Mr. Gertz.
Mine was covered.
Number 1.
Anybody else? Okay. Now is the time that we would have anyone who wishes to speak to our new items come to the podium and let us know which item you want to speak to and give us your name and address. And I think we're in the same situation. Nobody wants to talk to us tonight. So we'll come behind the rail and we'll start our discussion with item number 7 from the consent agenda. Ms. Link, would you like to start that for us, please?
I just would like the attorney to explain this a little. I'm just not sure if the public really understands what it is. I'm not even sure if I understand what Nulla bona means. It's a legal term, so just a quick explanation.
Certainly. From time to time, the tax commissioner goes through the digest and determines the properties that just are not uncollectible, properties that are subject to tax that are not collectible. 99% of the time, it's personal property because real property, you can always file a judgment in FIFA and ultimately collect that. But these are generally businesses that have gone out of business. There are no other assets to be collected, to sell and collect. And so this just happens every 1 to 3 years. The tax commissioner brings this forward. The law requires that the local legislative body approve that list before writing them off.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to see it go back on consent.
Okay. So we'll put that one back on consent, Gene. Mr.
I had a question about this as well.
Andy had a question about item 7.
So just so that I'm clear, Bill, there are some people on here that, for whatever reason, have failed to pay their taxes. If they were to subsequently create another business, the same individuals, can we file a lien against that personal property or against them, or basically is it the company itself that's liable?
It's the property that's liable. There's not there is a personal liability, but most of these are corporations that are defunct and have no assets. Conceivably, an individual, and I'm just trying to look on here.
There's some mobile homes and a boat, I think, that could qualify.
Yeah, it's conceivable you might collect those taxes later if an individual comes back. But
So if just to pick a name at random, if Mr. Joe Q. Public starts a business and that goes bankrupt, and then they start another business with a different name, then we can't go after that second business for the unpaid taxes from the first one. Is that correct?
if they've created an entity like an LLC or a corporation, which is true almost all the time, that is absolutely correct.
And the second question I had to do with the mobile home issues. So I noticed that the agent for the county has gone. It's on several of those. They talk about they've gone out to inspect the home, and they have been taken off the property without even the requisite permit being applied for. Are we within our rights to require the managers of mobile home parks to inform us when a home is about to be taken off their property?
That's a good question. I'll probably need to research that
Okay.
to see if I can get back with you on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill, I can enlighten you on that. I don't know that we've ever required them to, but they almost always did. And these may not necessarily have been in parks. Sometimes they're on private property.
Yeah.
And one of the things we find is sometimes they stay on the digest for years after they're not actually there, but you can't prove they weren't there. And so that those bills kept accumulating. And mobile homes were one of our biggest headaches. So. Okay, item number 1, Mr. Neeson.
Yes, ma'am. This is this has to do with bus stop shelters or bus stop improvements. And I just wanted to get some clarification. Maybe the manager can help me here. So, Blaine, I'm trying to get the sequence of events here. So we in February of this year, we requested a grant for $2.525 million, which included $505,000 of our matching from us from SPLOST. And then in March, we were notified that $480,000 was available. So what is the total that is available for this? Is it the 2.7?
Well, actually it's 543,000 in issue history item number 7.
Right.
It's an additional 543,000 that's available. So if you add it to the original amount of grant money only, then it's somewhere like 2.55 million in grant funds.
Plus our matching.
Plus our match.
So that comes to the 2.7, I guess, in facts and issues number 3.
Let's see. It's actually going to be a little bit over 3 million.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So what is the next step after we approve this? What will staff be doing?
Well, so we have current bus stop criteria, which I think is going to committee as well. Mm-hmm. And there are many things that we can do with our bus stop improvement program. We haven't moved forward on some of those, waiting to see the outcome of this. There's been some mention of, some art bus shelters in certain areas might be desirable, but it's certainly eligible to do a number of things to upgrade and improve our bus stops and bus stop facilities.
So will the commission, mayor and commission, get a proposal for consideration?
Well, and I need to talk with our transit director about that, but what I think we would do is wait and see the outcome of how y'all change the bus stop improvement criteria, and then staff will apply that to the known needs, and then we would come back with a prioritized list to help work through with y'all.
Very good. We can put this back on the consent agenda as far as I'm concerned.
And one of the things that you mentioned in our earlier meeting, Blaine, was that solar lighting might be one of the things that we could add to our bus stops that we don't necessarily have now. Was it Ms. Link? Kelly, I'm sorry.
Just a
quick question about eligible activities under this program, and sort of came to mind because of a couple of recent experiences in addition to the prospect of having an additional $500,000 to play with. And one of the things I've noticed locally is that there are several bus stops that are a short distance from a sidewalk segment but don't have a sidewalk to the bus stop. Would we be able to use this program to fund 50 or 80 feet of sidewalk that might attach you from an existing sidewalk to the bus stop?
That, I would need to find out from Butch about that, because if that's true, I'm sure there's some limit,
Sure.
of how far.
Yeah, probably not a half mile of sidewalk.
So we can certainly check on that.
Okay, that'd be great. I just noticed that as a community need.
Yes,
Which committee is this assigned to?
Yes.
I think it's government ops. I think
Government
it's
ops.
yours.
Well, since I'm not on that, I wanted to bring an idea forward that came with the transit study. They talked about the idea of including bike racks at our bus stops so that the person who's not going to necessarily need that on the bus, but it does help them pedal to the bike stop. So if you guys could consider that when you have this criteria of us maybe having a design guideline that included bike racks so they can be locked on.
Well, if this is the time to communicate with the GOC about that, I will. And that is, we need shelters on many bus stops.
Oh, yeah. And this should give us
A
money to do
dozen or
it.
so on Atlanta Highway alone. So I know that means we may have to get right of way or acquire land, but that's, to me, is a higher priority than, I'm sorry, Allison, than bike racks. Although I see the need, but hopefully this money can go far enough that we can, first of all, have shelters.
Jerry, I kind of think we're going to have enough money to put shelters wherever we need them.
I hope so.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, would tree planting be eligible for these funds? There's quite a few bus stops where, a strategically planted tree would do a great deal for shade. And I know the crossing guards at Chase Street often cross the street to sit in the shade of a tree that is shading a bus stop. But, I see people waiting out in the searing hot south-facing sun all the time.
You had something to share with us, Mr. Williams.
Well, I just want to make a connection for those that are watching about, the foresight of the mayor and commission and the citizens Advisory Committee, the last spliced, because, this money came available and we had the matching funds at hand. And they came back to us because of that. There's a lot of communities that don't have that money set aside for those purposes. And so it really allowed us to take advantage of bringing those dollars here to Athens-Clarke County. So that's a good thing.
And also having good management people that have their eyes open and watching for these things. So thank you, guys. Item number 10 is the next item for discussion, which is a revision of the policy and procedure statement.
Number 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss?
Number 4 and 5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
4 and 5.
I didn't hear anybody ask 4 and 5 to come up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Okay.
asked for 4, 5,
Okay.
and 7.
I'm sorry. I just put you down for 7. Well, it's 4 and 5. Okay, we've got 2 more
I
to
was wondering why
discuss.
you were going out of order. I asked for 4. I have heard some concerns from a constituent about this company. This is our privatized healthcare out at the jail, and I have heard concerns from at least one constituent about this company. I know that they're being sued by New York State for inmate deaths, and I'm just wondering how much investigation has been done into the company and how these contracts are weighed, especially when it comes to issues at our jail.
Well, and I can talk with the sheriff's office about that. They went through an RFP process. You could see the criteria that they used to help evaluate those. I got the same information you did, and I'm not discounting at all what was said. I did a quick search on the other respondents, and that seems to be something that happens in that industry, that, with the people under care in those adverse conditions, things happen, and there are lawsuits that result. I didn't have time to do all of them. I did 3. I'm not comparing the extent to one to the other. I'm pretty sure that, that may not have been part of the criteria, but we can talk more with the sheriff and hear from them.
Yeah, I'd like to keep this off consent to do some more research.
Yeah, I had a question too on a different front. And that is, obviously, some of these people who are arrested and come to jail probably have insurance. And my question would be, wouldn't we want to make sure we get reimbursed for that? If there's a way to do that, so we're not paying out of pocket for something when they may have insurance. I added it up. It's about $4,000 per year per inmate if you're figuring about 400 inmates, and $1.67 million would be a 2% increase to our employees in salary. So, I'm not saying obviously we can't take all that, but you start taking in perspective that we're paying all that for an inmate, and we can't do things sometimes for our employees. So I'd like to find out if that's something that, if somebody comes in, they have insurance, they can be primary, and then maybe whatever we have to do will be secondary, or we can somehow get reimbursed for that through their insurance company, whatever, to offset those expenses. So,
Good thing. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions before we move forward? Okay, that one stay on regular agenda, Jeannie. Item number 7, Ms. Link, you pulled it off.
We did 7 first.
Yeah.
5, okay.
I was looking at this.
I thought I was going to have an uneventful night tonight.
This is a quitclaim for an alleyway that connects 2 roads off of Prince Avenue that back up to commercial property. And from what I can tell, there's actually a lot back there that is accessed from that alleyway. It looks like it would be landlocking a property. I have concerns about quitclaim in these alleys anyways, because I feel like they could be put to good use in the future as public right-of-way or access. So I'd like to look further into that to see if what exactly the access to that lot is. I don't know, Jared might have some more information.
I don't think we ever actually own this property. I think we're making a statement that we don't have any interest in the property.
Yeah, but this is an alleyway, right?
Right, but I don't think we ever owned it. Is that
Well, by
correct?
quitclaiming, we're essentially shutting it down, right?
No.
No, so this is a common misconception by a lot of folks because it's called a public right-of-way, that public is equated to local government. But in fact, and this is true in many communities, we're no exception, that the original developer platted that. And, backyard alleys were used in the past for trash collection and other things. We don't pretend to have any ownership of that. All we're telling the folks are, if we had any, we're declaring, we're quitting our claim to it. And that, a lot of these alleys have just become common boundaries for properties, and we don't pretend to have ownership of that.
And sometimes they become overgrown and problems because nobody
Yeah,
claims on that.
I just have real consternation about going ahead and absorbing them into the adjacent properties, which essentially shuts them off for future use, because you never know if they could be put to good use. And a lot of communities are putting alleyways like this to good use, when it comes to accessing accessory dwellings. And I know this is commercial property, and I wonder if a day might come when it might be put to good use for service access for commercial property. I watched a...
Mr. Bierman, I have a question you may want to elaborate too. If we decided we wanted to utilize that for government purposes, we'd have to go through some kind of process to acquire it, wouldn't it? Because we don't own it.
So we couldn't say all of a sudden decide we were going to collect trash through the alleyways or something like that and start using it under current, we wanted to go in there and clear it and pave it or gravel it and say, okay, we're going to be collecting trash through this alleyway right now.
There would have to be easement rights obtained from all of the adjoining property owners
Okay.
to do that. And the quitclaim deed, in this case, has no effect at all on the use of that alley. The individual property owners that adjoin that alley have rights under the Georgia common law to access the property. The adjoining owners own to the center line, but it's subject to the right of anyone who needs to use that alley to use it at all times. So really nothing will change by the execution of this quitclaim deed. And
Is there a property that's accessed through that alley? It looked like on the tax map that there was a landlocked property back there.
that's a cemetery.
Okay, and so there would no longer be access to that cemetery?
Well, the deed or the requirement that the government is going to make is the deed is going to say it doesn't affect the rights of anybody to use that alley. It just wants to make that clear. So Georgia law actually gives an additional right to people to have access to a cemetery. Nobody under Georgia law can close off access to a cemetery. So whatever the use in the future of this property is, unless all the owners get together and do something separately, everybody who owns adjoining that alley has full rights to use it, including the cemetery.
Mr. Gertz?
Thanks. Bill drew out really the kind of contours of what we can and cannot do that I was interested in hearing from him. I will make the point, I pass this every day. Noah's in daycare on the health science campus immediately adjacent to there. And, I'm often cognizant of where there may be future interconnections, particularly for bike and ped access, and in this corridor where there's been a lot of attention. And this may well be a place where there could be access in the future, but I guess based on what I'm hearing from Bill and from Blaine, that access would be no more or less difficult for us to achieve whether we did this quitclaim process or not.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of when the government had to come in and acquire one of these alleys. There was an alley behind the row of townhouses on College Avenue adjacent to the Linden House. To make sure there was access to get to the new addition and the parking lot, there was one of these alleys there, but the government had to acquire the official ownership from all of those adjoining property owners to make sure there would be unencumbered access to it. So that would have to be the process for any other of these alleys around.
Any further discussion? Okay. You want to leave that one on consent, guys?
Let's leave it off for now. I'm going to go take a look at it.
Okay. Now we're ready to go to our regular agenda. Item number 10, which is revision of the policy and procedure statement from water and sewer and sanitary sewer services. Mr. Gertz, you want to start us?
I will, and I could kind of apply the statement I'm going to make here to the next item as well.
Maybe the next two.
The next two items, that's right. It seems that we do get these somewhat pro forma agenda items from time to time, and I'm supportive of allowing the Department Director of Public Utilities to take all these actions, given that we've approved every single one that's come before us. And so I would ask that 10 move to consent if possible.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with that?
See, I kind of do, and I know,
Okay.
and I know I'm not certified at all, but
Yeah, you're going to be living with a handicap if you don't get back in school.
I guess I am. So, and I guess my concern is this, and it's my concern is the delegation of authority to somebody other than the mayor who signs these contracts, and I just think we ought to think a little bit about that. The mayor and the mayor commission have an opportunity to sort of be a checks and balances to a lot of things, and I sometimes wonder. I know it'd be more convenient for a lot of people and for us if this were allowed to go through. But I do want us to be careful about removing some authority from the mayor to take a look at encroachments that are on the public's right of way, and we're the ones accountable for that.
Sure.
So I just want to put that out there.
Well, I'll just make a suggestion. Is that we could come back and rather than just totally delegating it to the head of the department, is that the mayor could sign off on it on the recommendation of the manager and the department head, and that would be that check where it doesn't have to come on as an agenda item. I thought that was I thought that was the way it was written. So yeah, does that not satisfy that for you, Mike?
That, as long as somebody's looking at it besides just the public director.
I thought I remembered that in there, but in case I didn't, yes.
Well, it goes to show why I need the certification, but
so you can learn to read.
I didn't read that part, but maybe.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 separate agenda items, and y'all are referring to different ones at different times. So the first one, the revision number 10, comes to the mayor and commission for approval. What the agenda item is suggesting is that the public utilities director, if it falls down those same criteria, making that exception for one lot removed that y'all have approved every time, he would sign it and that it would end there. Correspondingly, the mayor currently has, on number 11, the authority to execute these utility encroachment agreements. What's being proposed is that that delegation move from the mayor to the public utilities director. And then finally, number 12, these are contracts with developers for installations of public water and sanitary sewer lines. Currently, the mayor executes those utility contracts, and this is proposing that the public utilities director execute those contracts, just to clear.
Yeah.
So we're talking
That's
about three
what I thought
different,
I'd read.
three different items. Jerry?
The question I have is why do this? For who's it making it convenient for? What's the problem?
Well, I wouldn't pose it as a problem. I think it was, our new director is looking at everything with a different eye, just from an efficiency standpoint. The revision of the policy procedure statement, the last time that came up, I asked the question, Frank, I don't know if they've ever turned that down. And that started that conversation. He has subsequently suggested these other two. The utility encroachment agreements is something that happens with public utilities as a matter of course. And it's not really anything that's of policy nature. It's just sort of a transaction, if you will. And then the utility contracts, the benefit there is that typically it lengthens the process for the developer of about 7 to 10 days. It's a whole contract signing process. And we get that complaint sometimes that as part of the plans review process, that's sort of the final piece sometimes, and it takes time. But, this was just from an efficiency standpoint. If this is something that y'all want to retain and the mayor retain, that's fine as well. It was just suggestions about efficiency.
Yeah, my problem is just because we've always approved them doesn't mean we shouldn't keep looking at them. Who knows
Quitclaims.
what the problem could be. So I have to think about this.
Kelly?
When I read these, I certainly was thinking of the efficiency of process in mind. Certainly one stopgap measure that we use in some other cases is presentation of a notice of proposed administrative action. And so the commission in that kind of case would be alerted of any time that one of these was coming forward. And typically we're given a deadline of 5 days or 7 days. And if there are no responses by the end of that time frame, then the action goes ahead. But that wouldn't necessitate creation of an agenda item and the two-meeting agenda setting and voting cycle. So,
Ms. Rowling?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that my new added meetings being Mayor Pro Tem, I am seeing a little bit more about how much an agenda item is handled and the process that it goes through for it to be accurately talked about to the stages to get to this point, as well as the putting it on the website. And it has a lot of handling to it. So I'm all about being more efficient and effective. But so that's where I'm seeing it being helpful. Maybe this part is the easy part, this meeting and the voting meeting, but it's a lot of time for it coming through.
Yeah, I like the idea of speeding up the permit process.
Yeah,
Mike?
and I certainly don't. I could certainly understand the efficiency part of it, but I guess I'm just asking the question: at what cost do we get that, and do we get it at the cost of some future mayor and commission not paying attention to things, or some public utilities director not paying attention to things? I mean, and I wonder about the precedence that's being set. I mean, certainly on this issue, it may work out fine, but I know other issues we've looked at some right-of-way stuff. I mean, I remember when we looked at the Mart, for example, and having some public right-of-way use on that piece of property. I mean, I guess I just wonder if we open the door to this and open the door to ceding some authority from the mayor and from the mayor and commission without having a second glance at it. If it's just perfunctory, it shouldn't be that much problem for us to look at it. But I just think that for the accountability sake, that to me outweighs the cost or the benefit of that efficiency.
Ms. Link?
I kind of share those concerns. You never know what the future might hold. And, at the very least, I feel like there should be some kind of notice of administrative action or maybe some opportunity like we have with our demolition requests for the commissioner from that district to put a hold on that item and make sure that it gets that extra layer of review if any red flags do go up.
Well, we just had a notice last day or so of a administrative action from planning.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful. Yeah, so, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Mayor, so I could see the concern about right-of-way, but I know department directors have authority now to sign certain types of contracts. So how would this be, or to a certain amount of money, sign contracts? So how would, like, number 12 be any different than that? When you're dealing with just water, typical, and that might be an efficiency issue, how would that type of a contract be different than, say, a contract with a consultant or somebody like that they're allowed to sign? I mean, the manager I know has up to a certain amount, right, before he has to come to us, and department directors have a certain amount of money. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if it's in that case, not in the right-of-way issue, but on when they're installing things, why that one couldn't be an exception to the rule.
I'm not sure that any contracts don't come to the mayor. I sign a lot of them. Are there any contracts that the mayor doesn't see?
There's a certain level where the purchasing director can
just,
sign them
just
and the manager.
purchasing contract.
And then there's a level that is within the manager's authority, but you still sign the contract. It doesn't go to the mayor and commission.
Right, yeah. Because I knew I signed some pretty small ones and some pretty big ones. Yes, sir.
Well, and again, we're interchanging 3 different items. And, two of them have one is mayor and commission, 2 are the mayor. And y'all mentioned the notice of NOPA, and that might be overcomplicating the latter 2 and simplifying the first. So maybe we take these one at a time. Again, this was just an efficiency issue. If you're not comfortable, and and the mayor and Bill and I see these utility contracts all the time, and they vary from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. It's just a redevelopment usually, or a new development, and we install, and accept the extension. So I would not want to move away from what we've done to a NOPA from the mayor, because I think that you're going to get inundated with those things that are going to be somewhat technical. So if you're not comfortable ceding that authority, then we should just leave things the way they are.
Well, let's go back to item to because we have been talking about 3 at one time, which is confusing, and they're not exactly the same. Item 10, as I understand it, and it's been several days since I read all this, but I believe that's where you've got sometimes a lot behind a lot where there needs to be access. Is that correct?
It's one lot removed from
public
being
right of way.
on public water or public sewer.
Yeah, and to me, those just seem so simple. But I have no bias on it. Whatever y'all want to do is fine with me. Do you have something to say, Mike?
No, maybe if we just take the next couple of weeks to look it over a little bit more and just keep it off consent, that might be help us for this evening at least.
Okay.
And by then I'll get certified.
Well, maybe we run through item 11 and 12 real quickly. So we'll go to 11. Y'all want to discuss it any further? Or?
I was curious about Commissioner Wright's comment about items being handled multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it just takes a long time when you're using a Ouija board and a magic 8-ball. So, you know what I mean?
She does pretty well with that, though, I promise you. Mr. Neeson.
I would submit that maybe the agenda-setting process needs to be looked at if it's taking all this work and effort. I don't know. Maybe that's where the problem is.
I didn't say there was a problem. I was just agreeing efficiency and effectiveness. And then in item number 7, it talks about accountability and responsible government, improve internal efficiencies and effectiveness. Just tossing that out there.
Okay, item 10 and 11. Y'all want to do anything about 11, but leave it on you. Leave it where it is. 12, leave it on discussion. Because that's basically already discussed. Okay, so now we'll go to our staff reports.
Talk about 12?
Oh, can we talk? I didn't. Okay, I thought we already had. Go ahead, Mr. Neesmith. Sure.
Now, here's one where if it makes the permitting process shorter and more efficient. Obvious benefits. I don't see a lot of risks, and so that one might go as it is.
Well, I would encourage everybody to look at these 3 real closely before we get to our meeting to be sure that we're comfortable with whatever direction we go. So, okay. Mr. Brad, would you come up here and help us?
Are you certified, Brad? Are you certified?
Certainly not.
Certifiable, what?
Maybe certifiable.
Who'd have thought it could be so complicated?
I agree.
Steal your son's, and I think he's cute.
Try not to do this to you again.
So unbelievably nice.
Yeah. Thank you for.
I tried to do this.
I did. You'll see it.
Yeah, I couldn't get
There
to
we
come
go.
up.
I should.
You might have to-
We've had a little bit of a signal issue with the, earlier, we had some signal with, because my computer's showing it up, and we're not up on the,
Is it showing up as two screens? Do you have two screens? Is that the problem?
I've got full screen PowerPoint up here, but it's,
Do this. Yeah, Jeff.
did I give it to you? Will it pick it up when we go there?
Yeah.
There we go, okay.
Down short.
Magic fingers.
You got it,
And my
Brad?
lack, yes, I'm ready.
We're ready if you are.
Okay. We have 5 items for you this evening. First is a request to rezone a piece of property in 980 to 994 South Lumpkin Street from commercial office zoning to a commercial neighborhood plan development. It's on 1.1 acres, really at the corner of Lumpkin Street and University Court. The proposal is for a private 106-bedroom dormitory on 4 floors with common kitchen, dining, and gathering. It also has some ground-level retail and chapel uses in addition to that, and structured parking to provide parking for the uses within the facility. Vehicular access limited only to Lumpkin Street at this point, as Lumpkin Street is the only public right-of-way frontage that this property has. The building is 61 feet tall with, again, some landscaping, as you'll see in just a minute on the plan. There are waivers requested in conjunction with the plan development, an increase of maximum floor area ratio from 0.75 to a little over 1.0, a reduction in distance of planting of trees and conserved canopy, and then an excess percentage of ground floor parking. Our code for these types of mixed-use developments require at least half of your ground floor of any of these developments be uses other than parking that are commercial leasable uses, and in this case, they're not able to meet that 50% number. You see the property location here. Current and proposed zoning. Kind of some schematic drawings of the proposal. The 3 pictures on the left, if you look at the one on the bottom, as if you're standing in the middle of Lumpkin Street looking towards downtown, that's kind of the view of that, with University Court, which is private, owned by the Board of Regents there on the left, and Lumpkin going off to the right. Kind of give you a feel of scale.
I was thinking it was a more square lot. I was trying to picture seeing that view of it from the street. Can we go back so?
That's the configuration
Okay, I
of the
see.
lot here. So that corner,
So you're actually at a corner if you view
yes,
for that view.
that's
Okay.
facing the intersection
Okay,
with the traffic light.
because I had not seen any of the drawings, the schematics. That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, really, I mean, the building itself is this.
Uh-huh.
It's an L-shaped, and then this is the structured parking that's tucked back in and down below, which is, it's a surface parking lot now. I've got a couple pictures in a minute that may help. Site plan, and you've got a lot more detail in your packet in terms of floor elevations and different levels, but I'm not going to put all those up here. Here's a couple. That's kind of the intersection on the top where you see the chapel building. That was the view of that bottom picture where you're seeing kind of the 3-cornered building, and then the Lutheran chapel across the street.
And the building behind is a dorm.
That's the Oglethorpe House, I think,
Oglethorpe,
yes.
yeah.
That is a view on the top from behind the chapel, existing parking. and really both of those are. It's just it kind of steps down towards university property.
Brad, does the tower stay? Is that?
Tower does not stay. It is proposed to be removed. There is a good opportunity, if this were to be approved and developed, that tower would simply be replaced with structure rooftop antennas, which are permitted under code. I mean, we've got them everywhere. So,
Do you mind if I ask a question about the retaining walls now that you've got those pictures?
Sure.
If you go backwards to I'm trying to get a feel for where this property is. I know where they've got sidewalks, but the backside, the retaining walls are how high, and are they the existing ones?
yes.
Or new ones?
The retaining wall that you see on these site plans is right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's what is listed as a retaining wall. That is the existing wall that's back there right now, and it is probably 5.5 feet at the far. I think the tallest end of it is going to be down on this end,
Mm-hmm.
and it's too tall to easily jump on or off of, but
Right.
it's not a 10 or 15 foot wall.
Right. But then when you come from that corner, take that corner and come to Lumpkin, that's really high. That one right there that's towards Board of Regents property too, that's going to be high if the drawings are accurate. Am I?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at it in a little more detail, but, yeah,
And
because,
then-
I mean, we're getting up, well, and there's a big wall there now, too. I mean, because that's where you step down from this wall. I mean, there's some parking, and University Court kind of circles around, and then this is where those steps are that goes down into the parking lot for the next dorm, which is a pretty significant little topo change as you're moving down the hill.
Yeah. So there's no plantings on these two sides because that's the retaining wall.
Any plantings would be above the wall. The retaining walls are generally, well, the retaining wall on the top that we were just looking at is actually entirely off property. So there would not be, any of that planting would be in this strip, which right now, I mean, the parking lot, as I remember, it's been a while since I've been back there, but I think that parking goes right up to the edge of the wall. Almost, it's probably splitting Board of Regents property and Episcopal Church property.
So the variance for planting, does that have to do with them being able to plant and have those big retaining walls?
In
that one of
proximity
the-
of size of trees away from buildings, yeah.
That's one of the variances?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so pictures, site plan, there are waivers with this. Planning Commission is recommending approval of both the future development and the recommendation of the rezoning request with one condition, which is the site plan to be revised to remove Lumpkin Street crosswalk. I can jump ahead and get to that too. I can't. Or here. Okay. As I mentioned before, there's only one opportunity for access to this property, and it is right here on Lumpkin Street. They sought approval and some type of agreements from the university, but this is all, University Court right here is not a public street, and so they would have required access and easement agreements, which they were not able to obtain. So sole access on Lumpkin. It is designed and limited to a right-in, right-out only, and the initial design in working with the traffic engineering department was to shorten up a little bit. I think it shortens it a little, the left turn queue, to provide the pedestrian refuge island here with a pedestrian mid-block crossing, which the other component that this provided was really a physical barrier to ensure no left turn movements. And I think that's where you get into a lot of the traffic trouble, because Lumpkin northbound here is a single lane only, so any left turn stops, queue to turn left, would back up all northbound traffic. So the problem we ultimately discovered with the pedestrian mid-block there is if you were to put it in, when you get to the other side of Lumpkin Street to University property, there's no place for the pedestrian to go. There's a landscape strip and then a fence on University property, and the actual sidewalk is on the other side of the fence. So that would ultimately have required another agreement with the university to modify their landscaping and to install either a gate or remove a section of fence, which they did not feel like was going to be feasible. So the Planning Commission, as part of their approval recommendation, is simply asking to have that pedestrian crosswalk removed, which would then modify the refuge island to just a solid median island to continue to prohibit the attempts at left turns as a condition of their approval.
Where's the closest bus stop for this?
University bus stop?
Well, I mean, just a bus stop that that the
Probably right
residents would be using.
It's behind it.
The
You have to
bus
go
goes
back,
where O
they
House
turn
is.
around in
House.
the courtyard back there.
So
So
it'd
the
be on
buses go straight and then they loop back out
They
So-
cross over Lumpkin and go,
into that yellow dorm that you saw
they
behind.
come,
So
they
that's-
come back here, turn, and come back out at the signal.
So they can get the bus off Lumpkin Street on a side street.
Side street. That is not, it's private. It's really a parking lot
For Field Street.
that the buses go in and out of.
Yeah, they,
It's,
But do they load and unload? And I mean, where do they load and unload passengers closest to this project?
we could probably show you on the
In that
further-
circle?
the one that's got the dorms around it.
Yeah. And
It's
there's
that circle.
Back there.
So, see, to the left of that truck, it's out of the picture,
yeah.
back in there.
yeah, there's a little turnaround courtyard in front of that tall dorm.
But there's no reason that the students that are living that would be living in this dorm couldn't use that access to the bus.
Oh, no, no, it would still
Yeah, that was
certainly
just-
be available.
When we're talking about taking the crosswalk away, I was just trying to figure out where there was a bus stop and how they would
Well,
access it.
and there is, full signalized pedestrian crossings at that intersection too, on all fours.
Jared, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brad, I know that there is an existing entrance there, and that there are a certain number of cars that already park there. But do you know how far the entrance is from the intersection? And is it the same, basically the same entrance they're going to be using, or are they cutting a new curb cut? There's only going to be one entrance, I understand that.
I think I've got a picture. No, I don't, not of that section anymore. The entrance here is approximately in the same location as the old driveway that is still there, the little narrow driveway that I think served the second structure that was removed a few years ago.
Right.
That's the location here.
And would you hazard a guess at how far that is from the actual intersection? It's pretty close.
It's pretty close. Yeah, it is, the use restriction, if it were to be pushed a little bit further, possibly to this point, but, yeah, I wouldn't know a number. I mean, there probably are some dimensions on that site plan within it, but, yeah, it's,
And my understanding is that there's approximately 75 parking spaces there now. Is that correct? Something like that?
probably right. Yeah.
And it's mostly used for people who come and park and stay there all day, basically. People who are either employees or going to class all day. So they're basically going in once and going out once. So there's not a high number of trips out of that lot. But the request is to increase the number of spaces. So they're adding a deck. And I think that the number of trips is going to increase. It's very close to that intersection, so I have some concerns about that.
And I can't sit here and begin to tell you that I know who parks in that parking lot. You guys may know that certainly well, better than I do. The other big issue that I think you're pointing out here, though, is those parking lots back here, those are all access from University Court onto University property that then queues at a signalized intersection on Lumpkin Street. So those 60 or 70 spaces are using an access point that will entirely go away if this is approved. And all trips, right now they're coming out here, and now they will all be rerouted to that single driveway on Lumpkin. No further curb cuts on University Court onto University property.
All right, so there's the potential for more vehicles entering very close to that intersection, and it possibly being an area that causes some conflicts.
Possibly. I think anytime you end up with a physically restricted right in, right out only, it helps because you're not allowing any left turn movements. So it's only, to get into it, you've got to be traveling southbound on Lumpkin, and to get out of it, you can only continue south on Lumpkin, which, that was part of the Planning Commission discussion, that it may actually, if there was to be access granted from the university on the university court, it may actually have served to eliminate some of the ultimate trips through the university property from people in and out of here. If they had access to university court here, and they were wanting to go into town, they may exit left and then left again on the Lumpkin. Now, any exiting trips that want to go back north will more than likely exit left and then exit left again on the University Court and do the wind down through and come out on Baxter Street, because that's the way, either that or get over and go left through the university the other direction. So it is no doubt, I think you pointed it out, it is challenging from an access standpoint.
Right. And since, and I wasn't aware of the fact that they were currently able to use another
Oh, yeah, all
entrance, and
of those
that's
parking.
going to be shut off, so this could be a big conflict.
I don't know that the driveway in place on Lumpkin is even used anymore. I think it's all in and out off University Court.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon, and then we'll get to you, Diane. Sharon.
Yeah, so a couple of questions, Brad. How many parking spaces are they required to have?
They're right on the number.
So-
I mean, and this is a little bit of a hybrid. They've taken their retail, their non-residential space and done it at the one gross per 300 square feet. And that includes the retail and the chapel space altogether. And then they've provided one parking space per bedroom for the dormitory. So there's 106 plus the one per 300. I mean, that's typically what you're going to see with a project like this, is providing structured parking. Is they're not going to provide any more than they have to provide, because those things they run at about a clip at $30,000 or $40,000 a space to build them.
Okay, I got a couple more questions. So, I mean, I don't know of any other development on campus like this. I'm not really sure what to call it. I mean, it's a dorm, but it's also mixed use, but it's private. We don't have any private dorms on campus, do we?
Not that I'm aware of.
So I guess my question is, I noticed it said that the manual for transportation engineers or whatever, there's no traffic impact analysis done because there's no category. So I guess I'm concerned, why wouldn't we have one anyway? Why wouldn't we do a traffic study? Shouldn't we?
I mean, I think there were numbers provided as part of it. They're limited. It's a kind of a unique classification with it being on campus in terms of, this will not function with the same number of trips that a off-campus apartment would, for obvious reasons. But, it was all evaluated by our traffic engineering department. And, I will also tell you too that, this was another one. We don't have these a lot, but this came to you as a split recommendation. Staff recommended it not be supported. And there were some issues with scale and size and proximity that we had. Planning Commission felt a little different about it, which is absolutely their prerogative to do so.
Couple more real quick. So because it's mixed use, is there a requirement that it be only for active students, or can it be for anybody? I mean, how is this protected that it doesn't become like an apartment complex?
No, this is a private dormitory. It's being
anybody.
Presented under the Episcopal ownership, but the approval of the zoning is attached, and the PD is attached to the use. It would in no way eliminate or inhibit them from selling to a private group. It would continue to function as a dormitory from the standpoint there are no individual kitchens in the areas where the bedrooms are.
Okay.
But no, there's nothing in here that I would be aware of that we're not going to start evaluating to determine that they are enrolled students in the university living in them.
Okay, and the only other thing was just the aesthetics of it. I mean, I looked at it and it looks something. I mean, it doesn't look like it goes in the area very well. And I know I guess we don't really have any standards like that, but it does look it's an odd looking. It doesn't really look like it goes with some of the buildings that are close by, like Myers across the street or the Lions Apartments. And I mean, I don't know that we have any, requirements that but it does look kind of out of place. And that's just looking at the picture, And like I said, I know we went to a lot of effort with the hotel downtown to make it look like it fit, but, I just wondered why we don't have something similar for this.
Ms. Bell.
This is my district, and I have been keeping track and watching and listening all the way through the presentation of what we're seeing tonight. There are several entities that I've worked through today even on how to address my feelings and if I were going to vote officially. My first question came through was about the university having the rights to have access to buy this, and they declined that decision to want to purchase this. Second, I feel like that the Episcopal Church has done their energy to look at it as a possible good investment for them to do this. My other part of a question is the fact the dormitory, we don't have anything of this identity and have not had. Will it be successful? We don't know, but that's not up to us to decide. Location-wise, you can't ask for a better. We know our campus is trying to make everything more of a walking, and this certainly has the access to all of the above. As far as the business area that's going to be involved in this, I think this draws another balance to what the students would want to have. The kitchen, and that was one of the things I did some investigation about. On the first floor, they do have a kitchen to use and to do a group cooking situation or whatever. No, their rooms don't have a kitchen, but they have a microwave and access to have their own, maybe fix their breakfast a little or whatever. But to know they have access to a kitchen was very, very important to me. The parking and et cetera, I found very comfortable for that. The other is the traffic, to have that as safe as we could have it and to make it as comfortable and convenient. We've done everything we can with our road there with the bike. I just love what we've done with that, going down the hill, making everything as safe as we possibly can. So my stand on this right now is I feel like we owe them a fair shot at being a business, and why we have reasons to not. I can't come up with enough reasons to say not. So right now I feel comfortable with. As far as the appearance, I had to get used to what we did downtown, so I think I could probably get used to this, but there's just been a whole lot of different changes that's gone on that I've had to adjust to, so I'm not going to put that in my no column either.
Andy and then Mike.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brad, you may not know the answer to this. I don't know whether it came up in discussion, and I can certainly speak with the UGA people. But as you know, so all first-year students are required to live on campus. Would the university, has it come up in the conversation whether, if this were approved, whether this would count as satisfying that requirement?
It has not come up,
Okay.
and I would have no idea. I mean,
Okay.
I can ask. My guess is it would not. Because
Okay.
it's not technically on campus, it's private property, but that's certainly something we can pursue.
Okay, I can ask too. All right, thank you.
Mike.
I just have a quick question in response to Commissioner Dickerson. So I understand, and this does have some interesting design features about it, but I would also suggest too that the Catholic Center and the Lutheran Center and Presbyterians, I don't know what it is about the Protestants along this stretch here, but
You're protesting.
yeah, I guess they're doing something, trying to get as creative as the next one, I guess. But the question I have for Brad is about the pedestrian crosswalk. So we're eliminating that pedestrian crosswalk that would allow them to turn left into that property. Is that am I understanding that correctly?
Not completely.
So,
In the pedestrian crosswalk, I'll be honest with you, it was almost an afterthought, and I hate to use that term, but this was the most important aspect of all of it, which was a physical barrier that would ensure the inability for somebody, unless they just want to jump that concrete island,
right.
of trying to still stop in Lumpkin Street and make this left turn by swinging out around and coming in.
Oh, I got you.
So it started with the design of the barrier to physically prohibit the left turn movement if you're northbound on Lumpkin. And so then it kind of came, well, from that, if we're going to do this anyway, that may be a good opportunity to do a mid-block with a refuge island while we're doing it.
Right.
I mean, yeah, at
So-
the end of the day, there's a crosswalk here. I mean, there are crosswalks at this intersection
Right.
already. So it is not a remote area where people have to travel a long way to get to the next crossing.
Well, I guess my question is, if, and I may not be reading this right, but if they're going toward town, how do you turn left into the complex there?
You're not allowed to.
So what are you going to do? Circle.
Go someplace down the street and turn around.
Yeah.
Cruise.
That's
You'll
kind
have to get to a point where you're traveling southbound on Lumpkin
So
to get into it.
do we not see that as an issue maybe, or not?
I mean, it's certainly an inconvenience.
And keeping cars on the road longer than they need to be, I guess, or I don't know. I thought I read that right.
You did.
You through, Mike?
I'm done, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Melissa?
I kind of think this is an ideal location for a project like this. I don't really even have a problem with the way it looks. I kind of think it's an appropriate design for that corridor where you do have these mid-century high-rises. This is kind of like a more contemporary twist on that. And as far as the parking goes, I mean, I think you could make the argument that they won't have a parking problem because the folks that would be using that center will be living there. So, I mean, right now you have folks who go to the Episcopal Center who are coming and going and driving, but if a lot of these folks are actually living there, you know, their cars will already be parked there, or, you know, possibly they won't have cars and they'll just be walking where they need to go, which, being across the street from campus, ideally that would be the situation. The same thing with traffic. You know, I don't see how, you know, this would make for a great uptick in traffic count on the street because theoretically a lot of the customers for the Episcopal Center will be living there right on site. You know, I don't see a lot of downsides at all to this project, and I kind of would like to see more of this immediate university-adjacent student housing, you know, to keep the students closer to campus. And, you know, it looks like a pretty ideal living situation to me.
Mr. Kurtz?
I mean, in general, the use makes sense. I mean, given proximity to the university. Right before I came to Athens, I spent a semester at the University of Texas in Austin, and there were several private dorms immediately adjacent to that campus, and that's how they define themselves, as private dorms. So that's, I know, a product that we've not been accustomed to here, but it's one that nationwide has been out there. I think my biggest challenge is the one that Mike pointed out, which is that this stretch of Lumpkin is a fairly difficult stretch already, with basketball games that can provide an issue. The Tate Center and the gathering space that it provides, you know, also means that there's a lot of congestion here. It's relatively near the corner of Baxter Street that can back up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And so with all of those things already in the hopper, you know, what I'd like to see is this provide the least additional impediment. And to do that, honestly, what you'd ideally have is access, really egress onto University Court there, because I think the dynamic that Mike pointed out is exactly the one that you would see, which is if somebody was leaving this site and they wanted to go downtown, what they would do is pig path through a neighborhood or find a place to do a funky 5-point turn. And the same would be true if they were coming from 5 Points and wanting to enter this facility. So I know that the applicant and the university have not seen eye to eye, but I've encouraged both of them to get at the table to see if they can find some common ground, whether that means some reduction in the number of bedrooms on the facility, because once this is here, it's here, and it's going to be here for generations. And so what I don't want to do is introduce generations of residents of this facility to a challenging traffic pattern if there are other options.
Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, I have several things that I wanted to cover, and a lot of you guys have already covered that, the traffic being the main one. Everybody seems to be talking about the people that are coming there, and Ms. Link, as you had said, Commissioner Link, the people are already there, but there's a whole floor of retail. These people aren't all, you know, the residents there aren't going to be the only people keeping a retail place in business, as well as the social aspect. There's also social gathering areas. I think there's 2 of them for 44 people. We haven't heard a head count for what the sanctuary size is, so that's additional people to the ones who would be living here if these residents are students that go to our schools. There's nothing that says they are going to be students. the mission of this facility could be to where refugees or somebody else is coming to stay there. That could be temporary housing. We don't know the length of time the leases are or what type of leases. And those are the kind of things, as a parent who has kids in college, those are the kind of questions I would be asking if I had my kid looking at this to be where they were going to stay. Do you have a resident assistant? The dorms have some pretty serious criteria for the supervision that's there. And of course, this wouldn't have that criteria like the universities does. So there's that. And I'm kind of, what concerns me is the traffic so my district's on the opposite side. And so as you often say, I come and go from here every day through here. And there isn't a left turn lane in this area that's long enough. And to have half of this one chopped off to keep those people from turning left, it's interfering with the rest of everybody who's coming and going. So where we've been talking about how these people are going to come and go, I'm seriously concerned about the rest of the community's traffic pattern effect by what we've seen drawn. I'm not sure why this isn't being looked at like a fraternity or sorority as far as the criteria, or multifamily cause of, well, the Greek part of it. If this had 3 Greek letters on the front of it, we'd be talking very differently about this, and it would have different criteria. And so that's where I'm trying to make sure we're thinking about this, because if this gets built, we don't know that these would be the owners for how long. And so once it's built, and Bill, if you could, I had a question with you, and I didn't know if you had time. Can a bar be the retail that's on this?
A restaurant can be located there, but a bar cannot because it's too close to the Lutheran Center.
Okay. So I'm just, in my mind, we don't know a lot of things about what's going to be there as far as a good fit. And it says it's dormitory for students, but we don't know a lot. That can't be made. Just like we talk about the senior living criteria, there's nothing that can really lock that into it. And I'm concerned about the traffic that's coming from the social events that they have as well. And I think everybody has picked up on the other topics that I'm concerned about. So I think that we need to look long and hard at it, and I think we all are, because we've had good questions.
Harry.
I just have two quick follow-ups. So, I go through that intersection quite a lot as well, and trying to turn left from Cedar Street onto South Lumpkin is often tricky, because if there's traffic coming across that intersection from University Court onto Cedar Street, and there's a long line of traffic, sometimes you can only get 1 or maybe 2 vehicles through that intersection turning left from Cedar Street onto South Lumpkin. So that's something else another aspect of, I guess, what Commissioner Wright's talking about. But Bill, on the issue of the restaurant, I know you said it couldn't be a bar because it would be too close to the religious institution, but could that restaurant serve alcohol, or would it have to be a non-alcohol serving restaurant?
No, it can serve alcohol.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Neesman.
Brad, if I may, could you help me understand why this is defined as a dormitory rather than a boarding house? What is the difference?
And there's very little difference, I think, in dormitory versus boarding house.
We have that defined?
I don't have it in front of me. Don't have it in memory.
Yeah.
The issue with dormitory was it's generally 15 or more in a common environment versus an apartment where you have individual units separated with kitchens in them, which this was not.
Okay. All right, I need to study this. I'm trying to find the definition of dormitory in our code, and I can't.
Dormitory would be in 9.2 of the ordinance.
Thank you.
While you're looking, Ms. Wright has.
Not everybody is. Am I okay to go? And so I also wanted to say that I thought that the reasons that staff, the variances that they wanted were kind of extreme too, as far as I'm not sure if we've approved that parking. The ground floor parking, we have a 50% threshold, and they're asking for 81%. And then the same as with the floor area ratio. That's, I think, a pretty big one as well. So
Well, is there, were you asking to be recognized?
Yeah, once this is built and you have folks living in those rooms, then the property, or at least the property that's inhabited, becomes taxable, right? It hits the tax rolls. It's just the church gathering space that
I don't
is
know any reason it wouldn't.
nonprofit.
Do you, Bill?
I have not researched that, and there are a lot of variables. It's hard to say whether or not it would be taxable.
Okay.
or
Could you find that out for us to find out if?
I will do my best, but I don't know their business model. So a lot of the exemption depends upon the business model. We've learned that the hard way by the Nucci Space case. Things that I would have thought would be not exempt are exempt. So I will research it, but it will be a very qualified answer.
Okay.
Andy?
Well, just on this issue, I think, is this going to be a nonprofit? Because if so, it's exempt from property taxes, I believe.
No, you can have nonprofits that are still taxable. It's the use, but we really don't even know.
Okay. I thought there was a bill that went through the General Assembly about 8 or 9 years ago that affected the tax status of nonprofits, and we were particularly hit here in Athens because we have a lot of them.
I think your name
Maybe
is
that's
that
not
one, the
property
Salvation
taxes,
Army. Is that the one you're thinking about? What?
Just all of them.
There's the private dorms.
That's the only one I can remember.
Wouldn't the Nucci Space case?
Yeah, it was the law that led to the Nucci Space case, and it's caused a lot of confusion throughout the state
Okay.
as to what is and what isn't.
But you can look at that. You'll look into that.
Mr. Sims, you're the only one we haven't heard from.
Could you elaborate on why staff was opposed to approval of this?
I can. We had concerns generally with ingress and egress, being limited to one location. We had concerns, there were landscaping waivers requested with regard to trees and clearing. I don't know that those were deemed to be as significant from a staff standpoint. We did have concerns in the case of the floor area ratio, for example, where you're asking to modify your zoning from a commercial office to a more intense zoning classification of commercial neighborhood, which lets you go up to 0.75 in your floor area ratio, and then ask for about a 30% increase on the floor area ratio above and beyond what you just asked for in terms of a zoning change. It seemed to be for a commercial neighborhood type plan development with the lack of, the 50% ground floor on a mixed-use building is something we've pushed very hard for, and I can't think of one, certainly within our downtown, that we've allowed or supported any type of a waiver or variance to that percentage. Those were really the two big ones, the FAR, the ground floor uses, and then certainly, I think in everybody's mind, the issue of access is one that's got to be looked at.
Thank you, sir.
And I do have an answer. Boarding house goes up to 15. Once you go over 15, it becomes a dorm.
Yeah, 15 in a single room or related rooms, I believe is the way they say it. Closely associated rooms.
Y'all through with this one? Okay. Let's move on, Brad.
Okay. Next item is a request for another planned development at 412 North Thomas Street from commercial downtown, East Downtown design area to a planned development. This is the Hyatt Place that is currently under construction on a little over an acre. This one's a little bit unique for a PD in that you normally don't get requests for planned developments for a project that is currently under construction or well along its way and has been permitted as an administratively permitted use within our downtown. In this case, they saw an opportunity to utilize their rooftop for an additional amenity that they see to their restaurant, to their hotel. It is in conjunction with the restaurant that will currently be located on the ground floor on Thomas Street. The problem with it is they are right up on the 100-foot maximum height limit for our downtown district at the top level of the upper level of rooms. And we really had no way of, they thought the easiest way to seek, some level of permission to do something that they're viewing is very similar to what we have on top of the Georgia Theater, would be to pursue the PD with the understanding that if it is approved, they've really kind of locked themselves in on all other aspects of this hotel project that have been administratively approved up to this point. So that is something that they are requesting. Floor plan, and we only gave you've got elevations of the building within your packet. This is what they're proposing to do on the rooftop of the hotel in terms of a site plan layout. No cooking up here. It is, as I said before, their model is that this is basically very similar to a restaurant that has an outdoor patio that you can step out onto. In this case, it's just on top of the roof. You still order food from it. It will be plated up to you and served at that level. It's my understanding it will be open during generally same hours, if not the same hours, as the restaurant is downstairs. But that's just kind of a conceptual rendering of what it would look like. And then this, I use this to kind of point out from a staff standpoint that this one seems a little bit odd to maybe the general public as to why they're having to ask for a PD for a height waiver when there's all types of structures up on top of that building that already exceed the height of what they're wanting to build. And the reason for that is there are exemptions under our zoning ordinance for mechanical structures, for elevator chases, for rooftop egresses that are allowed to exceed that 100-foot height limit. But we cannot go above the 100-foot administratively with what we consider to be habitable structures. If they would have wanted to put some tables on the roof with some chairs and have a roll cart type beverage service up there, they could have done that administratively. When they got to the point that they wanted to build that, this with a roof over it, and it's able to be, with the roll downs that are able to be locked in so you can secure beverage items up there overnight, that becomes, in our mind, a habitable structure, as well as the bathrooms do that will be up there, which we could not permit administratively. So the yellow is the new area that would be built in relation to what you see already up there now if you're driving by. I think probably, honestly, you have to get some distance away from it before you would ever see any activity given the height of that building going on up there. And then the screening would screen tables and other things. So
before you move away from it, I had a question. How much visibility will they have from the roof, given all these impediments up there that look like you wouldn't have much where you can look out over the city?
I think they still have pretty good visibility. Here is the rooftop as shown here. This is the front of the hotel along Thomas Street. So, the majority of those large structures are here. So you've still got some area here in terms of looking south to southwest. I mean, the view to the east is almost totally unencumbered, as well as west.
It's a great use, yeah. Anybody want to comment on it? This is in Ms. Link's district. Did you want to open it, Melissa?
I don't really have any comment on it.
Mr. Gertz?
I really don't. I mean,
I guess to use Brad's phraseology, I'm looking forward to inhabiting this structure. And really, I mean, given that those allowable elements are higher than these additions, I don't think they're asking for much.
Yeah. Mr. Harry?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't really have a problem with it. I do notice that, unless Commissioner Hammy's going to say this, that I think this was one of the things that we had actually suggested that they look at, and so I'm glad to see that they've done that. But I do have a question. So if they're going to be serving food and drinks and other kinds of things up there, there's always the danger of somebody dropping a glass or something else over the side and it falling, 10 stories, 8 stories, whatever it is?
About 9.
As part of the PD, would we require them to only use non-glassware?
It has not been addressed as part of the PD. I don't know if there are health department restrictions or other things. Something we can check into. Honestly, I don't know that that's ever come up.
Well, I think at I think at the bar on the top of the Georgia Theatre, they only use plastic cups, if I remember correctly.
I had lunch there Monday, actually, and I had plastic
They
cup,
use
but I don't know
cans.
whether that's all they use or not. But it
Anyway,
was
if you
tea.
could look
It wasn't
into it, I'm
alcohol.
just thinking about somebody puts a glass on the metal rail and somebody else knocks it, and probably 999 times out of 1,000 it falls to the ground and nothing happens. But that one time when there's somebody sitting right under it, you get whacked in the eye, on the top of the head.
Let me look into it, because
Okay.
one, I don't know if there are health department restrictions that may catch it, and two, I don't know in detail at this point exactly what's going to go on between the pedestrian rail you see here and the actual edge. If there's another, where you'd actually physically have to throw something to get it off, or, but still, it's a
And
good
there's
question.
probably
and
somebody who might do that as well.
I'll look into it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I have a comment.
Yeah, I mean,
Ms.
that,
Link, you do have something.
I'm glad Andy brought that up, because, I mean, I don't know how accurate this rendering is with the flat rail, but if you mandate that the rail is curved so you can't set
Set things on it.
something on there, and also if it's set back a little bit, so if something is accidentally dropped over it, there's a ledge or something. I see, you see that a lot in New York in these rooftop bars. The railings are actually inset, 3 or 4 feet even.
Anybody else?
Just
Andy.
a quick comment and observation, and I certainly think this is an interesting use for it and an exciting use for it, really, if it can work out and everybody's safe. But just a little observation, and I'm kind of sort of glad that Reverend Maxwell isn't with us here today, because we'll spend 5 minutes talking about the bar and 30 minutes talking about the church. So that might pose a problem for him.
Anybody else have anything to say?
Nancy, I do.
Sharon, let the lady go first, then we'll get to you. Okay.
I guess, is it safe to assume that it's not in the airport overlay of any sort? There's lighting or any of that kind of? Okay.
It's not within the airport overlay, and they did address lighting, fully compliant with our ordinance, and their intent is low level.
Yeah, that's all that is. Okay.
Mr. Bagley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that was a very good observation by Commissioner Harrod about the potential for things falling off.
He did
But-
that once.
I'm sorry?
He did that once, that's why.
Oh, he did it? Yeah, well,
I think you say every broken clock strike twice a day.
But I do think that there are several structures on the facade of that building, several balconies and things
Be the same.
that would perhaps catch anything that's coming before it hit the street. Not saying we shouldn't look into it. I think it was a good thought. But I do think there's some things that might catch anything before it hits the street.
And what I'll do for you all is reach out to the architect between now and your voting meeting and have him provide a response to you.
Great. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on.
Okay? Next item is a special use request at 930 South Milledge Avenue, which is in the commercial office Milledge Avenue Special District Overlay Corridor. It is a request to expand an existing fraternity. The Milledge Avenue corridor allows for expansions of 40% or less as an administrative permit, but does not, in this case, this is well over a 40% expansion to the existing facility. There are 2 variances requested with this, one for maximum lot coverage and one for parking. No need to modify the future development map with this special use request, and as with all of your special use requests that come to you, this would become binding upon approval, both site plan, elevations, and report. See the property located here on the west side of Milledge Avenue between Woodlawn and Rutherford. This is the proposed site plan, and just I'll point out a couple of things here. The existing structure is here. Currently, it is a single driveway in. You see highlighted with the dashed curb cut. And so ingress from Milledge, egress to an alley off of Castilia in the back into the neighborhood for exiting. The proposed addition is here. The modification to close the access to the alley, to make this a 2-way ingress and egress off of Milledge actually eliminates about 4 of the spaces that they have now. I think there are 40 on the property at this point. That would reduce down to 36. There are currently, I think, the most recent number of in-house residents has been 18. With this addition, they would be requesting to double the number of boys that live in the house to 36, which is the same number of spaces that is provided, but there is also language within our parking section for this type of a use, that the intent of this is that whatever your requirement is in terms of residency, 24/7 residency, you should provide at least 20% more. That's the staff's interpretation of that language in 930, that there should be, in addition to one space for every boy, a minimum of 20% additional spaces for employees or visitors or guests. So those are the proposed changes. See the elevations here to the right, that's the front, obviously, and then you see the proposed expansion. This has been reviewed by the HPC for massing and scale, and it's been approved for COA purposes. The recommendations on this one from the Planning Commission, there were two variances. The first with regard to lot coverage, Planning Commission recommended approval. The parking variance, they recommended denial, and ultimately the special use denial based on the criteria of a special use really needing to satisfy code standards, whether it be through variance or otherwise, before we can recommend approval of a special use. With regard to the parking, as I mentioned, there are 36 spaces currently available, proposed on site. They have been in attempts to secure at least 10 additional spaces off site. They have a preliminary agreement with a tenant of a building, but have been unable to obtain signatures of approval. And with that, it's our understanding, based on what they provided, that those are not 24/7 off-site parking agreements. They're basically 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday is kind of the way that would work. I don't think the Planning Commission could get to a comfort level with that, and they weren't comfortable with basically sending it forward with some type of a condition that they had to obtain those before it could be approved. They asked about the opportunity to table, and the applicant was really not interested in trying to table at this point with the Planning Commission. So ultimately, the variance for parking was denied, and so they really had to recommend denial of the special use. It's my understanding you have received a letter requesting an extension to not vote on this at your May meeting, but at your June meeting, and I think that's largely, I think the letter indicates that the applicant's agent will not be in town for the May meeting. This has been advertised, so the procedure under our ordinance is that the item will still be on your agenda in May. It will be called like any other item, and you have the authority under the procedure section to grant up to a 40-day extension after the hearing has been held. So that would be the procedure they're asking you to consider at your May meeting. You're not required to extend it, but you certainly have that right to do so based on the request. And with that, the recommendation, as mentioned, was to not approve.
This is in Mike's district. You want to address this, Mike?
It's actually very much in my district, and in full
right around the corner from you, isn't it?
disclosure, I live on that other side, across from the dumpster that's there now. So,
In the dumpster.
and I don't know why it's called Castilia Avenue. I'm certain that Bill Berryman would have a history on that. He probably ran barefoot at some point in his life down that street. So, but at any rate, I will say this, and I think this may highlight, we were talking about things that we probably will talk about at a retreat at some point in time, and policy questions may have come up, and looking at our parking policies, I think, is something that we might want to consider putting on our list, because this sort of highlights this. And I've been sort of watching this because I knew this was coming up. And at about 11 o'clock this morning, when you think there would probably be a lot of cars there, I counted 9 cars there, and it's been that way all day. It was that way when I left to come to the meeting this afternoon. The fraternity is closed, but they still meet there, and they still have, believe me, they still meet there. They still have functions there, but at times the parking lot does get full, but it's not a burdensome full. I mean, there's nothing, really on Monday nights they have chapter meetings, but every other fraternity and sorority in town has a chapter meeting, and there's a sorority up on the corner there, and I don't know that they have as many spots as 36, and I don't know how many sorority girls live there, but certainly they utilize the on-street parking more so than the fraternity does. For some reason, the fraternity seems to find a way to park on site from that standpoint. But so I understand the Planning Commission's concern about the parking space, but having seen it myself, I just haven't seen that as being a big issue with regards to that, which just leads me to say that's why we probably ought to look at putting that on our list. But the benefit of all of this, and this is something that the neighbors around there have been struggling with for years, is closing access to that Castilla Avenue. Because what happens is, there's an entryway and an exitway right around there, so they'll cut through there and go, like we were talking about with the dorm, they'll go down Rutherford to take a left onto Rutherford, or a right to go to Milledge, or go straight across Mount Vernon. And so it really does drive a lot of traffic through the neighborhoods, and which is something a lot of neighbors around there have been real concerned with. But if this were to happen now, they would be able to close this off and just have the entry and exit way on the Milledge, which is really the way it should be. Especially if we're looking at traffic through neighborhoods. This would really help solve a big issue for the neighborhood, for the neighbors around there and the neighborhood in general. Not only on Rutherford, but on Cloverhurst and Mount Vernon and such as that. So anyway, we've got some time to discuss it. I will make a motion to table it as a petitioner has requested and go from there. But I would encourage you to come out there and drive around it, look at it. You can knock on my door. I may show you my artwork or not. So, have you seen? Yeah, Jerry's seen my artwork. That's why he's laughing. But anyway, stop on by. I'll show you what goes on around there.
Anybody else wants to come in on this one? Okay, we're going to the next item, which is text amendment. Brad.
Okay. We have two text amendments this evening. The first is something that was actually generated by this group that made a request through the mayor to have us look at some proposed amendments to Section 925, which is site design standards. The language that came forward to staff was to have us consider an amendment that would look at expansions of uses other than 1 and 2 families. So multifamily, any commercial, any industrial, that is more than 10% of the size of the structure, or more than, if there are site improvements, more than 10% of the site improvement area. At that point, once it triggers the 10%, it kicks in all of the required design standards. Biggest things we generally hear in terms of implementation issues with these types of projects: if there's not a sidewalk, they've got to install a sidewalk on all frontages. If there is not landscaping to meet our current requirements for parking lot landscaping, parking lot trees, street trees, they've got to plant those trees. Many times it leads to some elimination in some existing parking. Those types of elements, really the trees and the sidewalk are the two big ones that generally we hear. What you all asked us to consider was changing that number from 10% as a trigger to 25% expansion as a trigger. What we've looked at and would like for your consideration, and I'll explain why we did it this way, was it appeared to be that the areas that we really heard this a lot, especially as it relates to sidewalks and some extremely large parking lots that have not been landscaped, are in the more auto-centric corridors, the areas that are not classified under the level 1 or 2, more urban corridors in town. And largely on commercial general properties, which is really kind of our most intensive suburban zoning designation. So in lieu of across the board, everybody gets 25%, our concern with that was a lot of the in-town areas that we're doing a really effective job, we as a community, not necessarily as a government, because it's the property owners that are doing it, of building that sidewalk infrastructure in our in-town areas too. Those areas that the intent is more pedestrian scale, urban design environment, we really wanted to try to keep that lower threshold to get landscaping and sidewalks and those types of things built. And so what we're asking for is to only change it to 25% in CG areas that are on corridors that are not level 1 or 2, and those properties that would be affected, you see up on the map at this point. But it's largely Atlanta Highway, Broad Street, outside of the Beechwood area across the river. It's the sections of Danielsville Road, 29, 441 on the north side of the loop, and then some sections of the Lexington Road corridor, predominantly between the loop and Gaines School, Cherokee, that would be affected.
Mr. Neesman?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. It might have been a surprise to some of you that you asked for this, but that's fine. This is something Mike and I
I was saying this is surprising me.
Mike and I have talked about quite a bit, along with the Athens West Corridor Group. And it's because we know of some businesses that wanted to expand and even add employees, but the cost of their expansion above 10% was just not economically feasible. And one of them is even considering moving out of the county so that he can build the business that he wants to build. I think preserving the 10% rule for in-town urban areas is appropriate. I think that taking it to 25% will encourage expansion of businesses, redevelopment of structures, and give us some more flexibility on these suburban corridors that we need. Sidewalks are important, but right now we need a reason for someone to walk on the sidewalk to get to a business. That's what we need. So I hope you will support this.
Mr. Hamby?
And Commissioner Neesmith is correct. We have talked about this to a large extent on the Atlanta Highway or Athens West Corridor Group, and Commissioner Neesmith has been leading this effort. And it's important to really look at this too, because as Commissioner Neesmith says, it will offer some opportunities for businesses to expand out there and stay on this corridor, which is key and important. And it also, right now what we see happening is if somebody looks at a car dealership and turns it into something else, they're really not changing the footprint, which in some cases we'd like them to, but for existing businesses out there who do want to maintain their business on this corridor, this has come from them, and this will be a huge help for them and a help for the corridor.
Anybody else? Ms. Lincoln and Ms. Wright.
I think it certainly makes sense to do what you can to encourage the redevelopment out in the suburban areas, especially some of these strip mall developments that are kind of vacating. But I do have some concerns about, particularly West Broad Street inside the river. Like, I feel like there's a lot of dense residential property in there where that area could, in the near future, develop in a more urban sense. So I kind of would like to have us reconsider including that area and make sure that as those properties redevelop, but which are not necessarily strip mall properties, they don't have that same kind of development pattern as we have once you get beyond the river and out towards Atlanta Highway and further down Lexington Highway. We have had some pedestrian fatalities out there, folks trying to cross the street, and the lots are smaller with individual businesses rather than large strips. So that's my only concern about this. I would like for that percentage to remain at least in that area where you have some really dense residential property right nearby, and we do want to encourage that walkability.
Right, now I'll get to you.
May we have that map sent to us? I'd like that.
Yeah, this would be
I like the map, yep. Thank you.
Ms. Gertz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is appropriately tailored. There are times when we don't want to apply something countywide or in every kind of parcel, but there are some appropriate applications, and I think this is one. And that doesn't mean that every individual block is going to be perfectly formatted. I think, we could probably stand in any one of those red areas and individually say, I'd like a tree here, I'd like a piece of sidewalk there. I will point out that the segment of West Broad Street or Atlanta Highway approaching the river, but just to the east of the Middle River, is among the areas where Steve Decker has requested some cooperation with GDOT in using their pool of funds to place sidewalks. So I know that, in the public sector, that's already been pursued.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. We have one more, I think.
One more. This one really is more of a clarification amendment that comes to you from staff as the initiator. And this is requesting consideration of an amendment to Section 912, which is our special district overlay. I think it's timely that we've got it here before you this evening because this is kind of what the Milledge Avenue fraternity that we just looked at was working under. In the special district section, it lists as permitted uses the following categories, and it includes dormitories, boarding rooming houses, fraternities, and then it goes on to, under C, uses in the Milledge Avenue corridor special district overlay are permitted according to the use table in Section 910.2. Well, if you go to 910.2, which is the commercial sections, and you look at fraternity sorority, it has a limitation on it, and you go to that section, and it says if you are in the special district overlay, it's permitted as long as you don't expand by more than 40%. So it would be easier just to take it out of the special district overlay and simply just say that refer you to 910 for the uses that are permitted or not permitted, because we pick all of this language up in one spot in Section 910, including the commercial orientation of retail that have to be on Milledge Avenue. So, I mean, where people were getting hung up, and we had a couple people that came in, had gone not real far down the road, but they were they knew they were in Milledge Avenue Special District Overlay. They went to that section, and they saw that a fraternity was a permitted use. They didn't catch that it also says in the last statement, as long as all other applicable requirements are met, which you got to go to 10 to find. So we're asking to just remove it. It doesn't impact anything negatively, and it may eliminate some confusion down the road. And the Planning Commission supported that with unanimous vote.
Any discussion? I have a quick question for Bill. It's kind of off the wall before we break up. And it relates to the tax question, taxability. Could we possibly, and I know this is a real off-the-wall question, deal with the taxability of property when we're doing a plan development?
Can I think about that and respond to that when I respond?
I mean, and seriously, because I think that could make a difference with sometimes whether we would decide to allow maybe some little changes that maybe otherwise we wouldn't if we thought, well, this is going to end up not being an untaxable property. But if it's added to the tax rolls, it might make a difference in decisions. So.
I'll get y'all a response.
Hope to see some of y'all tomorrow at Time Shop. Great.